The Vietnam campaign established a unique military precedent, a combat role engineered for total exposure. Standard military doctrine is predicated on one principle: seek cover. An infantryman digs a foxhole, hides behind a wall. The helicopter door gunner had no cover, by design. The operational environment was an open doorway, 300 feet above hostile terrain. A single safety harness secured the gunner to the airframe. The slipstream was a constant physical pressure. A machine gun was their only tool. There was no armor, nothing between the soldier and incoming fire. This configuration inverted all tactical norms. Survival was not a function of concealment. It became a direct function of suppressive fire density. Statistically, this methodology positioned door gunners among the most vulnerable service members in the conflict. The soldier was transformed into a target, a tactical instrument. The absence of protection was a design specification.
This structural vulnerability extended beyond physical threat. It generated operational scenarios where human life became a variable in an engineering equation. How does a machine's technical limit translate into a crew's clinical trauma? The answer is found in the operational physics of the UH-1 Huey. Its maximum gross weight was 9,500 pounds. In the high humidity of a tropical environment, this number was not a guideline, it was a physical law. Exceeding it meant the helicopter could not lift. The case of door gunner Jim Chancellor is a clinical study. An evacuation, an overloaded aircraft. The helicopter's skids remain on the ground, vibrating under immense strain. With one hand, Chancellor continues firing his M60 machine gun, suppressive fire. With the other, he grabs a man. He feels the physical weight of the body resisting against the fuselage. Then, he pushes. The man fell. He was later captured and executed. Chancellor would carry this action for the rest of his life. This is the mechanism of moral injury, a trauma defined not by what was done to a soldier, but by what a soldier was forced to do. An invisible wound, incurred at the intersection of duty and physics. The man was gone. The weight was reduced. The helicopter broke free from the ground. The aircraft ascended. But the experience was permanent. It was codified by a single persistent sound. The UH-1 Huey entered service as a transport vehicle, a tool for logistics, not combat. Door gunners transformed its function through necessity. They turned a utility platform into a weapons system. This was not doctrine. It was improvisation under fire. This process had a distinct acoustic signature, the whop-whop of the main rotor, a byproduct of physics, generated as the blade tips broke the sound barrier. For infantry, it was the sound of support. For the gunners, the sound of the workplace. The ad hoc experience was eventually analyzed. The chaos of Vietnam was codified into procedure. The result was the first official manual on aerial gunnery, a document written from empirical, traumatic data. Today, modern special mission aviators still reference the lessons learned in those doorways. 58,220 never returned. The new doctrines were not written in classrooms. They were codified on the ground, between missions. A bullet passed 6 inches from the gunner's position. The crew chief inspects the airframe, marking each point of entry. 12 holes in the fuselage. How much time was the psyche allotted to adapt to 12 bullet holes? 30 minutes. The gunner disembarks. He sits on the sandbags. He lights a cigarette. The smell of burning tobacco mixes with the scent of hot metal and aviation fuel. During periods of intense campaigning, flight crews operated for 10 to 12 hours per day. This operational tempo systematically eliminated any possibility of psychological decompression. The cycle was a matter of statistics. The nature of the physical damage was catastrophic. Official reports documented severe burns, amputations, and traumatic brain injuries from crashes. But the cumulative trauma was not always visible. It accumulated with every 30-minute reset. The rotors of the next aircraft began to spin. The 30-minute reset was a direct consequence of the evacuation protocol, a standardized procedure executed under continuous enemy fire. The helicopter flares, altering its angle of pitch.
Nose up, tail down. The skids make contact with the landing zone, and the infantry unit disembarks. The door gunner provides suppressing fire, sweeping a designated arc along the tree line. The objective is procedural: get the soldiers out. Fire is maintained without pause. The barrel of the M60 machine gun begins to glow, a result of a sustained rate of fire often exceeding 500 rounds per minute. Muzzle flashes return from the foliage. Once the last soldier is clear, the pilot pulls pitch. The aircraft ascends vertically, gunner still firing. The trigger is released only after the aircraft is confirmed clear. A sharp ringing fills the gunner's ears. Below, columns of black smoke rise from the tree line. The operation is not over. Slick 25 is already beginning its approach into the same coordinates.
The approach phase for each assault helicopter followed a strict, methodical protocol. It began with a descent from an altitude of 1,500 feet. This formation, however, demasked the group for several miles across the terrain. Any element of operational surprise was negated. For the crew of helicopter Slick 24 operating west of the Aisha Valley, the radio announces the next phase. 2 minutes. The door gunner prepares his weapon, his hand sliding along a belt of 2,000 rounds. What is the operational algorithm when intelligence reports are proven incorrect? The protocol dictates that the mission proceeds. There is no alternative. The formation continues its descent. The jungle canopy rushes upward. Individual trees become distinguishable from the green mass. The first impacts strike the fuselage. Muzzle flashes are then observed from the tree line. The pilot's voice announces over the internal communication system. They were entering a hot landing zone. An American gunner provided cover. The target was not the enemy. The target was American infantry. The incident on March 16, 1968, documented a terminal point of systemic breakdown. Helicopter crews were forced to direct their M60 machine guns against their own ground forces. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson's crew was on reconnaissance. Below them, the village of Son My Lai. They observed U.S. infantry executing unarmed civilians in a ditch. Thompson landed the aircraft. He positioned the fuselage directly between the soldiers and a group of surviving villagers. His gunner was Larry Colburn. An order was given. Colburn swiveled his M60 machine gun. The barrel aimed at the American soldiers. A metallic click. The weapon's safety was disengaged. How did the social structure of a platoon reach open armed conflict? The answer is found in the total degradation of basic combat protocols. The confrontation was absolute. A static tableau of American infantry with rifles and an American gunner with a machine gun. In 1968, over 500,000 American military personnel were stationed in Vietnam. Yet the Son My incident was unprecedented. It was the first documented case of an aircrew targeting its own infantry to prevent a war crime. The distinction between friend and foe had collapsed. Colburn's M60 remained trained on the infantry, as Thompson's crew successfully evacuated 10 civilians from the ditch. The crisis at My Lai was not a spontaneous failure of discipline. It was the consequence of a military doctrine that had routinized preemptive violence. The tactic was called reconnaissance by fire. A simple algorithm: fire into tree lines, into huts, into any potential cover before an enemy could be confirmed. The smell of burnt cordite would settle in empty straw huts, a chemical signature left on a village that may never have held a single enemy soldier. This was standard operating procedure. It was not an exception. The operators of this doctrine were not seasoned soldiers. They were 18-year-old draftees, farm boys from Iowa, teenagers from Brooklyn. Most had never handled a weapon before boot camp. Now they were tasked with wielding a machine gun from the door of a helicopter. They were the arbiters of life and death. The rules were simple. Anyone running was classified as hostile. This protocol removed complex analysis from the equation. In a high-stress environment, amid the noise and adrenaline, there was only the directive. The regulations allocated less than a second to make the decision. The decision to fire was conditioned by a specific operational environment, a training ground built on the direct observation of catastrophic loss.
A trail of smoke streamed from the lead aircraft. The UH-1 Huey shuddered violently. It lost aerodynamic control, entering an unrecoverable spin toward the jungle below. The helicopter fell from formation. It vanished into the tree canopy. A silent moment, then a sudden burst of orange flame against the solid green. Why did this visual contact with losses so rapidly deform the psyche of aircrews? The rigid structure of the formation offered a clear answer. There was no escape. 6 UH-1 helicopters flew in a staggered line, locked on a course to the same landing zone. A deviation from this flight path was not an option. Observers were forced to witness the event in its entirety. The descent from initial damage to final impact lasted approximately 30 seconds. Each unit, a Bell UH-1 Iroquois, was valued at over $250,000, equivalent to more than $2 million in contemporary currency. Yet, during combat assaults, both the aircraft and its personnel were often treated as projected, acceptable losses. The remaining 5 helicopters maintained their course toward the landing zone. The constant observation of loss was not a tactical anomaly. It was a statistical norm, integrated into the sociology of daily life on forward air bases. The day began in a temporary shelter, a tent, or a hooch. A crew member would perform a routine equipment inspection. The M60 machine gun, ammunition belts, smoke grenades. The body armor, however, served a non-standard purpose. Crews consistently sat on the armored plates for protection against ground fire, a practical adaptation that ignored official protocols for torso protection. This was the material culture of survival. This routine was set against a backdrop of mathematical probability. Over 5,000 UH-1 helicopters were lost during the conflict. This figure constituted nearly half of the entire production run for that model. The calculation was unavoidable. Each mission carried a quantifiable risk, derived from the systemic attrition of men and machines. Helicopter crew members accounted for 1 in every 19 American fatalities in the Vietnam War. While American forces quantified risk, the Viet Cong methodically dismantled their systems of visual communication. The protocol for close air support was based on a simple color code. Yellow smoke designated friendly forces. Purple smoke identified the enemy. A standardized, unambiguous system for targeting. How did partisan units undermine this protocol? They achieved it through precise imitation. Viet Cong infantry began to acquire and deploy identical smoke markers. A door gunner would mark a confirmed hostile position with purple smoke. Seconds later, multiple pillars of identical purple smoke would rise from different points in the dense forest. The system was broken. The gunships, circling above, could not distinguish the real target from the decoys. For every one authentic marker, 3 false signals could appear. This visual chaos was compounded by another threat: the rocket-propelled grenade. From the flash in the tree line, a crew had 2 seconds to issue a vocal warning. The siege of Khe Sanh demanded a new tactic: a controlled crash. Helicopters had to dive from 3,000 feet, a near vertical plunge toward the airstrip, pulling up only at the last possible second. It was the only way to evade the primary threat: not small arms, not grenades, but the Soviet-made 12.7mm heavy machine gun. Its projectile was the size of an adult's thumb. This single round negated any standard protection. According to Soviet specifications, the DSHK machine gun could penetrate 15 millimeters of steel armor from 500 meters away. The duralumin skin of a helicopter offered no defense. A single impact could sever hydraulic lines. A rhythmic metallic thud against the fuselage signaled the machine's failure. This was different from the wall of lead, a tactic where entire squads fired rifles vertically into the air. That was a gamble, a dense but random curtain of fire. The 12.7mm was a system. Gunnery crews dug into fortified positions on the hills around Khe Sanh. They aimed for engines. They aimed for transmissions. The pilots had to fall through their kill zone. The door gunners could only hold on. They watched the ground accelerate towards them, waiting for the pilot to pull the machine from the dive. But the fire from the ground was not random. It was calculated.
The North Vietnamese Army had systematically adapted its ground ambush doctrine for use against aircraft. Captured enemy documents revealed a scientific approach to aerial warfare. Inside NVA field manuals, U.S. intelligence found precise technical diagrams of the UH-1 Huey helicopter. Methodical, analytical. Vulnerable points were circled in stark red ink: the engine, the transmission, the pilot's compartment. The instructions for infantry were explicit. To engage a moving Huey, a soldier must aim 1.5 helicopter lengths ahead of the target. A standard UH-1 was 17.4 meters long. This meant firing at a point 26 meters in front of the aircraft's nose, a calculated shot. It was designed to strike the engine before the crew could even react. This system extended beyond direct fire. The NVA identified and mapped all potential landing zones, recognizing the limited number of clearings large enough to support helicopter operations. They prepared these zones. They set up interlocking fields of fire, and they buried explosives, rigged to be triggered by the powerful downdraft of the rotors. The practical application of these enemy doctrines was concentrated in contested areas. The hot landing zones. Why did aimed fire in these zones prove impossible? The density of the dust cloud generated by the rotors often precluded visual contact. As the helicopter descended, the main rotor wash aerosolized the local red laterite soil. A thick cloud enveloped the aircraft. Sensory deprivation was total. Pilots lost their external reference points. The door gunner's directive remained constant: suppressive fire. The objective was the tree line, approximately 100 meters distant. This was the assumed position of Viet Cong forces. The protocol required a high volume of fire to inhibit enemy action during troop disembarkation. It was a mechanical process. Precision was not the objective. The doctrine of suppressive fire did not include provisions for acquiring and engaging individual targets under these conditions. The doctrine of suppressive fire was a response to tactical conditions, but survival was dictated by material engineering. The standard UH-1 airframe offered its crew no ballistic protection. A specific ritual became standard practice for door gunners. He would unstrap his M69 fragmentation vest. It was not worn on the torso. Instead, the gunner laid the armor flat upon the fuselage floor. He then sat directly on top of it. This was a non-regulation adaptation to a lethal design flaw. The primary threat was not horizontal. It originated from below. A K-47 rounds punching upwards. Rocket-propelled grenades tracking the machine's slow descent. The impacts registered as a series of sharp metallic pops as projectiles perforated the cabin floor. The only barrier was the aircraft's skin, 2 millimeters of aluminum alloy. This material offered negligible kinetic resistance to small arms fire. The helicopter had no armored side plates, no ballistic glass. For the crew inside, no cover existed. To compensate for this vulnerability, crews began modifying their equipment. Their primary tool was the M60 machine gun, 7.62 millimeter, 550 rounds per minute. Official doctrine specified a fixed mount, safe, restricted. The reality was a set of elastic bungee cords. The factory mount had mechanical stops, engineered to prevent the gunner from firing into the helicopter's own rotors or tail boom. Why did crews dismantle these factory limiters? Because abandoning safety standards increased the field of fire below the fuselage. At 300 feet, a restricted arc was a tactical liability. The improvised system allowed gunners to lean far out over the skids, engaging targets passing directly underneath. But the M60 weighed 10.5 kilograms. Holding it steady against engine vibration was physically exhausting. This improvisation created a new risk. One wrong move, one violent maneuver, and the gunner could be thrown from the aircraft. The only countermeasure was a simple strap known as a monkey harness. It was not officially rated for fall protection. The gunner clipped it to a point on the helicopter's frame. The necessity for these battlefield modifications stemmed from a fundamental doctrinal error, a mistake made in the early 1960s. The helicopter was designated as a logistical asset. Its purpose was transport, not combat. The initial doctrine envisioned helicopters moving troops and supplies far from the front line. But the geography of Vietnam rendered this concept obsolete. The absence of roads and the dense jungle made helicopters the primary method of troop insertion. By mid-war, the U.S. Army operated over 7,000 UH-1s in Vietnam. A transport vehicle had become the most numerous target in the conflict. The enemy adapted. Viet Cong forces learned to ambush landing zones, concentrating fire on the slow-moving aircraft. The first armed responses were not official. They were improvised. Volunteers used their own infantry rifles, firing from the open doors during approach and extraction. The practice demonstrated a critical need. A doctrinal failure was now being corrected by individual soldiers. By 1965, the stopgap measure became official policy. The U.S. Army mandated a crew of 2 door gunners for each transport helicopter. A new mandate created thousands of high-risk vacancies. They were filled by a specific demographic. The soldier is 18 years old. His boots rest on the edge of an aluminum floor. Below them, 3,000 feet of empty space drops away to the jungle canopy. The dominant sound is the overwhelming roar of wind and the main rotor, suppressing all else. The average age for an American combat soldier in Vietnam was 19. This placed door gunners among the youngest and most exposed groups in the conflict. How did a transport helicopter become a trap for its crew? The institutional blindness of command left personnel without basic ballistic protection. They had no armor. The cost of a failed logistical doctrine was not absorbed by the institution. It was transferred directly to the individual. These factors statistically established the door gunner as the single most vulnerable American combatant of the Vietnam War.